Beautiful people, welcome back to another video. My name is Pete, some call me Pilot Pete, and today we are doing a thing a little bit different. Instead of my normal every Sunday vlogs, those will continue, those will be out every single Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern. But what I'm gonna do differently now is instead of incorporating flight debriefs into those videos, they're gonna be a separate video within my YouTube channel. This just makes it easier for those who have no interest in kind of hearing the nitty-gritty details about flying, waypoints, VORs, ILS approaches, all those good terms. That won't be in there. Otherwise, these vlogs are just gonna get way too long. My parents and my girlfriend were complaining 45, 50-minute videos were just way too long on a trip when I added in those flight debriefs. But I know a lot of you are on this channel because you enjoy that flight debrief. You're either private pilots, up and coming, instrument commercial, airline pilots in training. And you like to see kind of the in-depth chart detail, what we're doing from before takeoff to cruise, arrival, descent, all that good stuff. So I definitely want to keep doing them. I'll hopefully make one, after every other flight, every special flight, whatever. I don't have a schedule yet. They're going to drop, during the week. It won't be on Sundays, and we'll kind of see where it goes. So I just operated from Miami, Florida to Colombia, Bogota, Colombia. It was my leg to fly. I'm going to go through the charts that we have on our company iPads, kind of show you what we're doing, what we're talking about, what the pilots are looking at as we make our journey to Bogota. These videos are going to be very raw, just kind of run through it. If you're interested in seeing more visuals like the airplane, the flight deck, the Boeing 767 itself, check out my Sunday vlogs. You know where to find them at. Otherwise, without further ado, let's jump into flight debrief, Miami, Florida, down to Bogota, Colombia. All right, folks, welcome to the flight debrief overview. Here it is. We went Miami down to Bogota, Colombia. It's pretty sweet. What happens with my company, they send us the flight plan in a separate app prior, usually about an hour and a half, 2 hours prior to departure. And what we can do is just upload it into our Jet charts, and it just builds the entire flight plan with the planned departure runway, the SID, standard instrument departure, the waypoints, and then the arrival. It even throws in our alternates in there. Total distance down to Bogota today was 1,400 nautical miles. Miami down to SKBO, Bogota, Colombia. It opens up a bunch of free time for that we don't have to type in all these waypoints. So here's the overview of the flight. As you can see, the Northeast was getting hammered with weather, but our flight down to Bogota was pretty smooth. So we start off in Miami, Florida. The first page I'm looking at is going to be our taxi diagram. Here's an overview of Miami International. Today they were departing runway 26 right. That was based on the winds leaving Miami. So it's nice in the app. We can see right here. Again, this is not going to be updated from when we departed. This is current, but the winds were pretty similar. It was like 220 at 15, gusts 18. So it's actually pretty rare to depart 26 right to the west, because normally the water's over here, the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. The water comes off the ocean. We're usually departing 8 left. But needless to say, we departed 26 right. We were parked over here at gate 60 today, so I have that highlighted prior to push. And I pre-flighted the 767. Captain did most of the interior inspections. I had to pre-flight the crew rest module since it was an ETOPS airplane today. And then about 45 minutes prior to departure, we were ready to go, got our final weight and balance. Ground crew hooked up to the 7.6, talked to the captain, let him know that we were all set to go. I called ground to get clearance onto taxiway Kilo, and they cleared us to push back onto Kilo, tail to the west, to taxi to runway 26 right. So we started pushing back. As we're getting pushed back, the captain calls for engine start. On the 767, we're going to start the left engine first, then the right engine. That's my job to do the engine starting. I would say every airline I've flown at, the FO starts the engine so the captain can be outside, meaning he's looking outside the airplane while I'm looking at inside the parameters of the engine, making sure it's a smooth start. Once we get fully pushed back, 2 engines started, the ground crew disconnects, their tug heads back into the non-movement area, and then we run our after start checklist. After start checklist on the 767, few things on there. APU comes off, we turn the packs on, the isolation switches go off, and then I set the flaps to 5 since it's going to be a flaps 5 departure. I also make sure that the auto brakes are set in case we did have any issue on our departure. Once that after start checklist is complete, I call ground. They gave us clearance to taxi to runway 26 right via Kilo, and then we started moving. So la-di-da, there was an airplane actually going into customs that we had to hold for just a second on Zulu, and then we continued our taxi down to runway 26 right. Took about 6 minutes at most, and then once we got here, we were holding short 26 right. We were told to contact tower on 118.3, and we just waited for the inbound aircraft that were landing 26 right to land before we got clearance to take off. We held short for about 10 minutes until we finally got clearance for takeoff. So we taxied onto the runway. I turned on all the lights. We actually complete our before takeoff checklist on the taxi right around here. So we're all set to go, cleared for takeoff, 26 right. Captain transferred the controls to me before we started rolling, and then off we go. As we're rolling on the runway, our call outs at my company, 80 knots to make sure our airspeed's alive. We're checking that. Then the only call out after that is V1, which is decision speed. That's when the captain takes his or her hand off the throttles, and then VR, rotate. That's when I'm pulling back on the yoke and we're actually taking off off the runway and on our way. But we're not just going random places. We're flying the Guava 2 RNAV departure, as you can see here. All these notes are pertinent, but we all talked about them prior to departing. Like I said, on different debriefs, I'll talk about different things. The big thing for us was 26 left, the climb gradient. We needed 500 feet per nautical mile to 520 feet. Luckily, I don't have to do any mental math or anything like that because the 767 FMS calculates all that for us. We were pretty light today, took off about 309,000 pounds, so it wasn't too heavy, and we were able to make any climb restrictions that they had. Miami obviously is sea level, being right next to the ocean. There's no mountains, so it was a pretty non-event climbing up, and then we're hitting all of our waypoints. The departure tells us to intercept the course to first fix was a Casino. Once we hit Casino, it was Kuzi, Hammock. We were leveling at 5,000 feet per the SID. We get that from our top altitude here, level off at 5,000 feet. As I was climbing up around 3,000 feet though, we were talking to Miami departure. They told us to climb and maintain 16,000, so 16,000 feet. The captain reached up, dialed in 16,000 into MCP, and I just kept trucking along, following the flight director, but hand flying, holding 250 knots. That's pretty much every departure for jets. We're going Hammock, Lonzo, and then on our way to Guava. By now we're talking to Miami Center, and they're climbing us up to the flight levels. I believe flight level 230 was the first one given, and then they actually cleared us up to flight level 370, which was our cruise altitude for the day. Once we were cruising, we entered different airspace. So we had to talk to different, I think it was Havana approach. We talked to Kingston approach, different radios. We were able to use our normal comms, but it's very hard to understand the different countries and their dialect. Everyone speaks English. Fun fact about aviation, everyone in the world, if you're flying a flight from Germany to Paris, they speak English the whole time, at least they're supposed to. That's like the international language for aviation. We're crossing all these fur boundaries. We have clearance, we have a flight plan, so there's nothing too crazy to do. We're talking to all the different approaches, and we're finally back over land. We have made it to Colombia. It took about 2.5 hours to get to this area, and then there was some weather we had to deviate. And this is where it becomes interesting because of the high terrain, as you can see here. I don't know what these mountains are called, but they're mountains for sure, up to like 16,000 feet, which is no bueno for airplanes. You don't want to be anywhere close to those. Then we had some weather to deal with, not to mention the lack of communication there is with the different language barrier and just the different rules that different countries have. So I come up top here and change from origin Miami to destination Bogota. I hit the standard terminal arrivals or star, and we were given the ILSEV 4 Echo arrival. So it's really different than the United States. Is normally right here all the names will be, but as you can see here, 4 Echo 2 Tango RNAV, but then you got to come in here to find which one you're doing. So it can get kind of confusing. Like I said, if you're not used to the international, it can be a little bit what the heck's going on, but luckily I've been here before, Captain's been here before, and it was no problem for us. I highlighted our route. I normally don't do this in flight if I'm flying into Memphis or LA. I'm so used to it. The points are pretty easy to see, but I didn't do this for you guys. I did this for my essay or situational awareness because I had no idea kind of this is so jungled up. It just obviously made it a lot easier to highlight. So ILSAV at or above 18, and then their fixes, they use numbers. BO 804, we had Pepit, we had Sur 01, Sur 02, Sur 03, Tobaki, Amvez, but you can see all these different arcs and these different loops. They never really bring us all the way around here. So it's really important for the pilots to be on top of their game, because a lot of the times as you're coming from the north, they'll just clear you direct Amvez. As you can see at Amvez, it's the initial approach fix for the approach for runway 14 right, but turbojet aircraft at 230 knots at 13,000 feet. So if I'm up here at 18,000 feet and I have to be here at 13, that's not much time to slow down, get down, all that kind of stuff. So you have to really kind of have tribal knowledge and or have just done this before to know that, hey, we don't have all this time to slow down and descend. They're probably going to give us a descent early, and that's exactly what they did. There was some weather right around this area right here that we had to avoid that will make that look like a thunderstorm. So we just flew this way on heading. We had to make sure that we didn't get descended into this mountain, because unlike ATC in the US, traffic control in the international, you can and will descend you into a mountain. I know that sounds crazy. There's obviously procedures. I'm not just saying they will do it, but basically like the pilot is in 100% control. So if you're on a heading and you're not on their route and they give you 18 and you accept it and there's a mountain there, that's kind of on you to know it's there, or to say unable, we need to wait to descend. So a lot going on. Luckily the autopilot's on obviously at that altitude. I'm pilot flying. I'm doing the left and right deviating. I'm watching the weather. He's talking to ATC, the captain was, and getting us safely down. But luckily the weather wasn't too big of a problem. We just navigated it to the south, and then we got cleared direct Amvez. I pulled the speed brakes out and slowed to 230 to hit that Amvez at this altitude and speed. And you can even see here there's a little note, 8 nautical miles from Amvez. You want to be between these speeds, so even slower prior to reaching that fix. From there, it's time for the approach. So hit the approach tile, and we got the ILS Yankee to 14 right. As you can see here, Bogota has a bunch of runway 14 right approaches. Why we do the Yankee, I'm not exactly sure. That's what was broadcast in the ATIS. That's what ATC gave us, so that's what we're doing. ILS Yankee 14 right. We briefed all this at cruise. We talked about the min safe altitude from the airport. As you can see here, 17,000 feet, because you got these mountains right off the arrival runway. There's freaking big mountains there that you don't want to hit. So they have this big, oh there it is, 12,000 foot right there. This big turn, if you do have to go miss, if you're landing runway 14, the last thing you want to do is lose an engine, can't make that turn, can't out climb that mountain, you're in a lot of trouble. So Bogota just adds this extra kind of awareness, pilot, heads up, if you will say, especially because like I said, we don't come in here every day. So we got cleared for the approach. I coupled the approach mode with the autopilot. It captured the localizer and the glide slope right around this BO 612. We flew down, and like I said on my vlog, if you guys end up watching that, I was high and fast, and that's pretty much what happens every single time if you're not prepared for a high altitude. Because as you can see here, the airport elevation at Bogota is a staggering 8,300 feet. So that's almost 3,000 feet higher than Denver International in Colorado. So it just makes for less performance with the airplane. It slows down, takes a lot longer to slow down. The flight controls aren't as responsive. The engines aren't as responsive. You just have to be on top of your game whenever you're coming into high altitude airports. Another thing that's unique for the Bogota arrival in the 1-4 right is the missed approach. You actually have to make sure that you have, as you can see in the notes, extreme caution to the east southeast due to mountainous terrain, 9,800 feet or higher, 20 nautical miles from Bogota VOR. So you have to make sure you actually have the climb gradient to do the misapproach. So this is something that's pretty, I wouldn't say rare, it's at some airports, but misapproach climb gradients are usually not a thing because there's nothing to hit. But as you can see here, you need at least 2.5 degrees, 152 feet per nautical mile, I should say, to make sure you don't hit these mountains. Well, I'm not running this math. No one's running that math. Luckily, like I said, the 767, our FMS, runs all that. We get the data prior landing to even descending to make sure, okay, hey, we have the performance with 2 engine. We might not have it with 1 engine, so we might have to come up with a contingency plan and all that good stuff. So we're talking about that all the way back at cruise, about half hour, 45 minutes prior to even descending, so we know what the heck could do, what if this happens, kind of running through all those scenarios. Fortunately for us though, we weren't planning on losing any engines. We didn't lose any engines. Captured the glide slope, slowed down, got stable, flaps 25 landing in the Boeing 767. Our final approach speed was 133 knots, which is about 145 miles an hour. And then we landed runway 14 right. As you can see, it's super, super long. And that's because of the high altitude. Planes need longer to take off and land, especially when they're heavy. So they built these runways appropriately with how long they are. And ATC told us before they cleared us to land, plan on exiting at Kilo 6 because there was an aircraft we ended up seeing right here. So they didn't want us exiting Kilo 5 because we needed to come down here. So as you can see, the landing distance required 10,200 feet. We had 10,000 feet kind of to work with, even longer if we needed to. So long story short, it was no problem for me to land on the touchdown zone. I was a little long. If you listen to the vlog, the goal is to touchdown here. 85% of the landings happen here. And then the goals, the go around parameters, are you have to be within the first third of the runway. So these markings right here that you got to make sure. So I touched down probably right around here. I floated a little bit, which tends to happen with high altitude airports. A smooth touchdown. I mean, we had auto brakes. I had set auto brakes to 1. I clicked them off almost immediately because we were getting way too slow and we didn't have to want to ramp up the power. Barely touched the brakes, barely touched the thrust reverser. Around 40-ish knots, the captain said my airplane, so he took it from me, transferred controls, and then he ended up pulling the airplane off the ground. I should say taxiing the airplane off the ground right here at Kilo 6. And then they told us to contact ground. Once we're over the hold short bar, it's exactly what I did. We kept it moving. Ground told us to taxi to Echo 16 via Kilo and Juliet. So I run the after landing checklist, which is pretty simple flow. By flow, I just mean I just kind of do it with my hands. I've done it dozens, hundreds of times by now in the 7.6, and then I back it up with the checklist. That's what a flow is. That's how a checklist should be run. It's a do and then read. So for us in the 7.6, it's bring the flaps up, turn the appropriate lights off, turn off terrain, weather, turn off the auto brakes, stow the speed brake and or the spoilers, and then APU as required. So taxi to gate 16, captain set the parking brake, hooked up to ground power, and then both engines were turned off, and that was the flight. So let me know what you thought about that. That's the flight debrief, kind of short and sweet, or maybe for some it was long and boring, I don't know. We did Miami down to Bogota. It was 3 hours and like 22 minutes en route. Don't really go international that much based on my seniority, but we're starting to get a few trips here and there. But more importantly, please, 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 it's my first time doing just a debrief video. Let me know what you thought. Yes, no, you liked it, you didn't like it, too boring, too slow, more detail, talk about the charts more, talk about what we're talking about as far as flight crew goes, the air traffic control communications. First time, I could use all the feedback. I would really appreciate it. And if you guys do like this and I get enough people hitting the thumbs up button, subscribing, saying, commenting more, yes, then I'll start doing them. More detail. And like I said, I enjoy talking aviation. I enjoy helping people out, giving details about what's going on. So I'll certainly keep doing them if, like I said, my audience says keep bringing them. So I hope you enjoyed that little debrief, and this will come out, I don't know when. I'm going to be editing it raw, easy, just popping it in there for you guys to get the information. The vlog will come out on January 12th for this trip. So if you're interested in seeing kind of more behind the scenes Bogota action, make sure you check that out. As always, be kind out there. It's a much better way to live your life, I promise. Get your workout in, because it's non-negotiable. I got to make sure I don't, get too vloggy right now, just a debrief. But as always, I appreciate you watching. If you could subscribe, like, comment, again, it helps the channel grow and gives me more motivation to keep making these videos. So be well. I'll see you in the next one.